Hello, everybody, and welcome to Education Leadership for a Digital World, a Digital Promise webinar series supported by the Wallace Foundation. I'm Sarah Ross from Transcend, and today's webinar is called Rethinking Education, Resources for Safe and Equitable Planning for Fall. Transcend is a national nonprofit whose mission is to support communities to create and spread extraordinary, equitable learning environments. We've been listening to school communities and working directly with them, especially since COVID-19 hit, to codify strong models and to offer support to schools during this challenging time. That's also a time of great innovation and change that's possible to come out of this. Our discussion today will highlight the story of one of our school partners, Ness Elementary in DC, and how they pivoted to remote learning with a real focus and attention on students' social emotional well-being. Then we'll explain how we've codified models like this, and we'll show you some free tools and resources we've created to help schools plan for this fall and beyond in a way that really prioritizes well-being, health, joy, and safety, while allowing learners to feel engaged, seen, and empowered. During today's session, we'll also reserve some time for Q&A. So as any of the presenters are speaking or we're showing slides or our screen, please add your questions to the Q&A box and we'll do Q&A at the end. And now I'm gonna pass the mic over to my colleague, Jen Charlo, who's also a partner at Transcend. And she's gonna set the stage a little bit more behind the work that we've done.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jen Charlo. I want to start out first by talking about the context that we are in. Transcend published a paper that described, the three main jobs that are required of schools right now: responding, recovering, and reinventing. And so we know that right now the work can feel taxing, but at this moment, we might never have this situation again where we can actually reinvent on a massive scale. And so, of course, there is a need to respond and recover, which includes tending to trauma and foundational learning and stabilizing. But there's also an opportunity to do that reinvention. In the best case scenario, schools are using this time to do the kinds of things that they've always imagined doing. And so just this morning, I heard a school partner say, from now on, we're going to use online learning to help students with the highest needs get matched with teachers that have the highest expertise. So now in their scenario, you don't just have a teacher just because that's the teacher you have this year. You can actually do some different matching. Another school said, we will use this time and anytime kids are in person to just do projects. And so as Hugh Vasquez from the National Equity Project said, disturbance is required for change. Disturbance is happening right now as we speak. We will use this opportunity will you use this opportunity to return to status quo, or will you try to create the educational system that you want? And today is about seeing one of our school partners, and Cynthia Robinson-Rivers can share more about her story.
Thank you so much, Jen. I'm excited to be here to share a little bit about Van Ness and some of the strategies that we've used that have been successful at our school. So again, I'm Cynthia Robinson-Rivers. I'm the head of school at Van Ness Elementary. A little bit about Van Ness. We are a small elementary pre-K 3 through 5th grade neighborhood school in the Navy Yard area of Southeast Washington, DC. We were reopened in 2015 after having been closed for about 10 years. And we started back then with just early childhood, pre-K 3, pre-K 4, and kindergarten, and have since grown by one grade level every year up to 5th grade, which we'll have next year. We are a uniquely diverse school. Our neighborhood has both racial and socioeconomic diversity that informs the population of our school. With 60% of our students Black, 29% white, and 11% Asian Pacific Islander, Native American, and mixed race. Just a little bit under 50% of our students receive free and reduced price meals, and about 20% of them are students that have special needs. We've had a focus explicitly since we started back in 2015 on socio-emotional learning. So on both teachers building their capacity and their knowledge and skills around this, and around having a behavior and discipline system that emphasizing teaching appropriate behaviors as an alternative to harsh punishments and rewards. And we found that we've had a lot of success with that. We work with a partner named Transcend that's helped us to refine and name our 3 design anchors. One of them is student well-being, and that's all of the socio-emotional development work that we do. Another is student as maker, encouraging students to be creative problem solvers and have opportunities to work in maker spaces in the classroom. And the last is student as autonomous and self-directed learner. Students able to have choice and autonomy during their day to work in a project-based and hands-on way. So today what we're going to do is share some of the strategies around wellness that we have used both before and after the pandemic and school closure. And you're going to have an opportunity to hear from one of our students, a rising 5th grade student, and also one of our amazing teachers, a 4th and 5th grade special education teacher. So with that, I'm going to allow you to hear a little bit from Zanaya, rising 5th grade Van Ness student.
How do your teachers and classmates show care and compassion for each other?
So in the morning, we all sit on the carpet and we gather around and we just connect with each other when our friends are sad or they're not really having a great day. Usually, we go to the safe place to say, are you okay? Check on them just to see if they're all right, but sometimes they just want to be alone, so we give them their space, but we check on them in the meantime.
What about the daily Strong Start videos? How did they help set you up for a successful day of learning at home?
The daily start videos, they helped me because, there's a lot you do in your daily start videos. You do breathing, which really helped me because it's kind of really hard at home. So it really, really helped me.
And how were you able to take some of the strategies you learned at school and even thinking about the safe place and then incorporate it into your home learning environment?
I made a binder, and since we are not at school and we don't have our safe place, I incorporated that into my house. So I made myself just, somewhere to just sit down, breathe, and just relax, really. And I have that in my binder.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jenny Christopowitz, and I'm entering my 14th year of teaching, 13 of which have been in Southeast Washington, D.C., where I was placed as a 2007 Teach for America Corps member. I absolutely love working at Van Ness. As you can see from the video of one of our students, Zanaya, the kids are just amazing. At Van Ness, we participate in the Strong Start, which consists of morning rituals that we use consistently to help our students connect to school community and focus on learning. These morning rituals are grounded in brain science, and students not only learn how to do the strategies, but also why we do these morning rituals. The Strong Start really begins as soon as students walk up to the main entrance doors at Van Ness. They are greeted by supporting staff. Students get to pick a greeting of their own, and then they proceed to their own classrooms where they're greeted by their individual teacher at the door. The teachers at Van Ness are very intentional about planning the moment-to-moment movements that students make as they enter any classroom in Van Ness. So for example, in my classroom, students enter every day hearing the song Lovely Day by Bill Withers play in the background, and they also enter smelling different aromas and scents that come from our diffuser, because we know that there are so many positive benefits of music and aromas that really trigger dopamine from the brain. Once students come in, they set their daily intention, where they then hang up their photograph of themselves onto our Thinking of You board. They unpack and then eat a nutritional breakfast with their classmates at their table. And then once they finish breakfast, the real magic begins. So we then form our opening circle, which starts off with a student-led chant. And then we get into our unify. And during this time, students acknowledge each other. They state the names of students who are absent. We share some anecdotes, and we also make sure to recognize loved ones that need to be kept in our thoughts. So this type of relationship building is really essential because it helps produce the hormone oxytocin, which just makes us feel good. And then next, we participate in our mindful strategies and activities, which teach the students composure strategies so that they can become responders rather than reactors. And this part is really essential for utilizing the prefrontal part of their brain, because this is where the actual learning and the focusing can take place when this space is used. So we use this time to teach the strategies which actually reduce the stress hormone cortisol. And then, as you saw in the video of Zanaya speaking on the breathing techniques, this is the time that we teach these techniques. One example is called 5-2-7 breathing, where students breathe in for 5 seconds, hold for 2, and then release for 7 seconds. Next, we participate in a group activity that purposefully pairs students in pairs, small groups, or as a whole class. And this time is essential really to building more school community and also fostering trusting relationships. Different activities include anything from an I Spy game to creating a secret handshake, or even having a dance-off. And then last, students spend some time just thinking about that daily intention that they set for themselves when they entered the classroom. We have a class-wide daily intention, or I should say monthly intention, which is usually something like practicing empathy. And then students also set their personal intentions, which could be something as simple as I'm going to work on being kind to a friend or a sibling. Usually by this part of our morning circle, 100% of the students are demonstrating composed minds and bodies, and they are ready for a successful day of learning. Now, of course, throughout the day, students are going to be experiencing different emotions and some negative stress. So to support with these moments, every classroom at Van Ness has a designated space to help students utilize their self-regulation strategies. And some of these spaces, which Zanaya mentioned in the video as the safe place, we can call it the calming spot or the peace walk. They're there for students to use. And in these spaces, you'll find certain tools such as stress balls, magnetic boards, puzzles, coloring books, and also photographs of the students and their families. So as we transitioned to virtual learning, it was essential for me to capture these morning rituals and our strong starts in daily videos so that students at any time could participate in a strong start. We literally picked up where we left off on March 13th and just recreated the strong start in our homes. And it was decided to have these videos pre-recorded because some of our students at the time did not have technology or internet. Students were on different schedules. So just having them have the option to watch a video at any time was really important. I did my best to make the Strong Starts interactive as possible, where we talked about a lot of the topics that we would talk about in a normal classroom setting. I played Bill Withers every morning on the videos. We talked about the different scents that we were smelling at home. I would pose questions so that students would respond, and then I would share their responses in the next day's videos so that they built on each other. And then myself and my co-teacher also met with the students for a live Strong Start every Friday. During this journey, students actually began to create their own safe place and calming spots at home. We had some students who would literally use a corner in their bedroom to create a calming place. We had some students that created gardens and they would plant, and the plant life would be their calming space. As Anaya mentioned, she actually created the tools that she had in the classrooms designated space and created her own binder that had the breathing techniques listed for her to refer to and different tactile objects for her to touch when she was feeling any anxiety. So as you can see, the Strong Start is really the foundation for our classroom environment. A day without the Strong Start would imbalance our bodies and minds. We live and breathe the discussions, the strategies, the mindfulness that stem from these morning rituals. And it is what unites us and keeps us as one, whether we are in person or learning digitally.
Thank you, Jenny. I spoke earlier about our 3 design anchors being student well-being, student as maker, student as autonomous learner. And all of what Jenny and Zanaya described around Strong Start are part of the student well-being design anchor. Well-being consists of 3 parts. The first we call care, and it stands for compassion, assertiveness, routines, and environment. And care is all of the universal tier 1 supports that every single student receives who attends Van Ness. It includes the type of language that the teachers use, what we call a calm, neutral, assertive voice. It includes the room environment. Jenny spoke about the aroma, but we also think about the visuals of the room, the lighting in the room, the presence of pictures of family, the inclusion of natural light and plants, subdued colors, and emphasis on student work versus commercially produced work. All of those contribute to the environment in which students are learning. And it also includes Strong Start, that set of activities that happen at the beginning of the day that we've tested, and we have found that by 9:30, if we go through those activities with students, they're going to be in an executive functioning state and ready to learn. In addition to care, we also have what we call Boost. So for 90 to 95% of students, you set them up with all those proactive supports of care, and they're going to be able to handle the daily transitions and the challenges and rigor of an academic day at school. For 5 to 10% of kids, they just need a little bit more. It might be a student who has a disorder, someone who has faced trauma, someone who needs a little bit more structure to be able to navigate the day. And so Boost is the set of tier 2 and tier 3 practices that our teachers engage in. They include some things like TLC, which stands for Time, Love, Connection. We survey students at the beginning of the year. We ask them questions around if they have someone they can depend on, if they have a good friend. The answers to those questions help us identify students who may be in need of a person at school who they can go to, or who may be in need of practice building a healthy relationship with someone else. And so they'll be assigned a staff member, and that staff member will check in each day, not contingent on behavior, not around anything other than making sure you're okay and seeing you and hearing you. We have some supports that are really proactive and some supports that are reactive, right? So another example of one that might be reactive is called structured recess. If a student has been unsafe or harmful to others during their recess period outside, it lets us know that unstructured time is not a time that student is ready for. And so as an alternative, instead of taking away recess ever, we would say, let's have this child be with one of our socio-emotional learning staff members in a small group where they engage in a reflection on, whatever injury they've caused someone else, practice getting along, collaborating, cooperating with others, and structured play for a time until we see that child is ready for the unstructured environment of recess. That structured recess is another example of a tier 2 or tier 3 boost support that a small percentage of our students might receive. And lastly, we have Family Circle. So we partnered with an organization called Flamboyant Foundation that's really helped our teachers have and understanding of family engagement strategies that include home visits. Usually in a typical year, 95% or more of students receive a home visit, and our aim is for at least half to be before the school year even begins. We know that building relationships with families and understanding that they are valued and equal partners in their children's education is fundamental, and those positive relationships help us to be supported in a positive way by our parents as we both work to educate the child. Teachers also engage in what's called ongoing communication, where they proactively message through videos and photos using apps like Remind or Shutterfly or websites that the teachers have created, sort of showering the parents with positive information, which we know is necessary before the parents might be able to receive constructive feedback about their child's either academic progress or behavior at school. And lastly, we have academic partnering with parents, whether through a goal and data-driven parent-teacher conference or another whole group data analysis meeting that we bring the parents to the school so that they really truly understand the learning taking place and are better equipped with the skills to help their students at home. So all of these are in place, and what we've had to do starting last March is to see how we can shift some of these structures so that they're continuing even in the virtual or distance learning setting. You heard a little bit from Jenny and Zanaya around how Strong Start has been translated to video and sometimes live Zoom, and how the safe place, this physical place that the children could go to in the school can be translated at home with materials that the child may have at home and with structures that are supported either by the family members or by the teacher. As we have been starting to prepare for next year, we're really thinking a lot about which structures are especially important as we return to school from the pandemic. And one of them that we think is highly valuable is a structure called social stories. So social stories are something that actually you would typically see in a self-contained classroom for students with autism spectrum disorder. Before you may transition or at the beginning of the day, you would sit with a child and show pictures accompanied by words that prepare the child for what's coming next. And that preparation and those visuals help minimize the stress and anxiety that come with the transition to a new activity. And so what we've done as a school is taken that very tier 3 practice and sort of blown it up, and it made it one of our universal practices. So even when school is happening, before a teacher lines the students up to go to music, for example, he or she may take out the "we're about to line up" social story and read it to the students with the pictures. Here we are in line. Here we are walking down the hallway quietly. Here we are entering the music classroom. Here we are sitting in music, hands in our lap, crisscross applesauce. And we found, both anecdotally and quantitatively when we took data on this, that when our teachers have fidelity to that, they really have much more success with transitions. So the slides you're seeing now are examples of social stories that we're preparing as we prepare for having kids return to school. We know that the return to school and what school will look like and what the day will be like is a cause of a lot of stress for our families and our students. And so on home visits this summer and in communication that we send to families before school starts, we're gonna send a social story for how we return to school, what the school day will look like. In this example, we come to school and we wear our mask, is one that we think will be critical for easing that transition for both our parents who are going to be nervous about the safety and health of their students, and our students who are going to be entering school in a very different way than they experienced school before COVID-19. The social stories are one of a few different supports that we've put in place with the help of our partners at Transcend. And so now I'd like to pass it over to Katie from Transcend, who can share a little bit about some of the other resources that we've been creating.
Thank you, Cynthia. Hi, everyone. I'm Katie Bowen, and I'm a partner at Transcend. I've had the joy of working with Ness since 2016 to help build, codify, and start to share their approach to school. And I've seen some questions in the Q&A after listening to Cynthia and Jenny. How can we learn more? My role today is to introduce you to tools that can help you, I hope, as you prepare for school this fall. But first, let me just give you a bit of background on how the tools came to be. So for the past several years, we've hosted school leaders, teachers who have visited Van Ness, experienced how powerful the staff and student culture is there, and leave the visit asking, how can we do this at our school? And in response to that, we've been learning how to spread the model. So for the past year and a half, we've worked with 5 other DCPS elementary schools to help them implement this model in their communities. And this work has really helped us figure out what are the types of tools and supports that teachers find most helpful in taking on this work. And we know that this summer, more than ever, schools and districts are really focusing intently on a big question, which is how, when students and staff return to learning, are we going to create the conditions for them to feel safe and cared for? And those things, like meaningful relationship, an inclusive culture where people feel physically and psychologically safe, those are big things. They can feel daunting, they can feel somewhat fuzzy, and we're really hopeful that the work we are doing can help translate those into highly practical, healing-centered practices that you all can use as you think about how to create that type of climate for your school communities in the fall. And so we're excited to share the results with you. Over the past few months, we have had an amazing team working with the amazing team at Van Ness to learn about how do we modify the student well-being practices in care and Boost in particular to work in a learn from home setting, or in a setting where kids are in person but have to be physically distant. And so we've spent a bunch of time observing teachers like Jenny, interviewing teachers to learn, what's working, what's not. Jenny talked a little bit about the morning meeting and how to translate that strong start ritual. So we grappled with questions of, do we do a live morning meeting or a pre-recorded one? And knowing that different classrooms may need to do different options to maximize attendance and participation. How do we do each of them in a way that really achieves the result of kids being able to connect to one another and feel safe and focused as they start their day? So got a lot of input from the teachers at Van Ness, from talking and watching them. And from that, we've created a suite of implementation tools to help you learn much more about how you might implement these practices in your own communities. So the slide that you're looking at here in blue shows a snapshot of the types of tools that you'll find in the library. On the left, you see this quick guide, and this is present for each practice. Gives you a quick overview of, what is this practice? Why do we use it? How do you do it effectively? What are links to examples to see it in action? There's also a short 3 to 5 minute video for each practice that gives you the headlines of what this looks like. There are sample stories from teachers of why this has been valuable, how they have used it, and templates or other tools that you can download and use directly or modify in your own communities. I saw a question in the Q&A earlier around what's the guidance around planning. These tools have a lot of the guidance around how to plan to help teachers understand what's the purpose of this, what are the essential components, and what's the spirit behind it, and then give teachers a starter set of a menu of activities that you could choose from as you're doing this for the first time. There was another question in the Q&A around whether teachers or students have a role in selecting any of the Strong Start activities, and they do. So we also have examples of places where, for the community building activity, students might sing a class song, and students could certainly be involved in choosing what should our class theme song be. Maybe we make up motions that we do together every day to remember that we're part of this classroom team. So we released our first wave of tools this week. These are focused on the strategies that you heard Cynthia and Jenny talk about: consistent routines using social stories and visuals, and the various parts of the Strong Start morning kickoff. We'll be adding to the library in mid-August with another wave of tools with some of the other care practices in particular that Cynthia narrated through earlier on, and we really hope they're helpful to you, and we're eager to hear your feedback on how we can make them even stronger. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague David to show how these tools fit into our larger library of resources.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Katie. I'm going to share my screen here. And as Katie mentioned, I'm going to take about 10 minutes and walk you all through a variety of supports that we've created for schools that are going through the recovering to reinvention process that Jen described at the top of the webinar, including how to access all of the amazing resources from Van Ness that we've talked about so far. So the page that I'm on here is on our transcendeducation.org website. At the top, there's this COVID-19 support tab, and inside of that are 3 different tranches of supports that we've created to help with this recovery reinvention process. The first is a playbook of guidance and tools for schools who are going through the process of thinking, what does it look like for us to live into our model in a remote learning or socially distanced context? The second is a library of examples of what other folks have created, because there's no reason for all of us to need to reinvent the wheel. And a third is a Transcend design community for folks to join, where you can share ideas with others. The library is what I'm going to bounce into first, because the library is where we have this information from Van Ness, as well as from many other schools that are going through the same kind of work of building socially distant and distance learning models to meet this COVID moment. So within this library of school design examples and resources, there are 3 different, you could almost think of them as kinds of books in the library. The first is comprehensive school and system designs. This is soup to nuts, everything about the way that a particular school runs their remote learning model or socially distanced learning model. Typically, that school or system design will be made up of several experiences. So at Van Ness, Strong Start is an example of one experience. Asynchronous instruction around academics is a second experience. And then there are a variety of others for each school. And then the artifacts live within the experiences. Those are the actual nuts and bolts things that you use to enact that experience. So sample videos of what Strong Start looks like, or a planning template for Strong Start, all live inside of that Strong Start experience, which lives inside of the Van Ness school or system design. You scroll a little bit farther down on the page, these tiles represent the actual books on the shelves of the library. There are 177 right now. This is growing over time. We're adding to it every day as we come into contact with more amazing work that communities are doing across the country and internationally. But 177 is a lot. And so we've built a couple of tools up here for navigating and finding exactly the kind of thing you're looking for. You can search by text if there is a particular kind of resource or tool you're looking for. You can search by source. So these are the sources, communities that have created particular kinds of remote learning or socially distanced materials. So you can see Van Ness is here alongside many others. You can search by setting if you were looking for hybrid, meaning in-person and remote learning, or just remote learning. You can search by school element. So if you wanted to find the comprehensive school or system design, soup to nuts, everything about the way that they're running their model, or I'm just looking for information about adult roles in learning. I'm just looking for information about curriculum and instruction, or just examples of space and facilities. You can search for examples by grade band or by the size of the system. So we have, some folks who have built things for schools of 300 students, some folks from very large districts who have said, here's the way we do remote learning at Miami-Dade. It's very useful to be able to filter by that. So because we were talking about Van Ness, what you could do is you could go to source and say, just show me the information from Van Ness Elementary. And so in here, you now see there's a template for comprehensive school system design. Here's everything about the Van Ness Elementary remote learning model. That's then made up of several experiences, which you could access. You could look and see how do they do enrichment, like art, PE, music, Spanish yoga. You could see how they do small group instruction or see how they do Strong Start. Or you could get into actual artifacts, like here's a sample schedule for the day or sample daily family email. Alternately, we were talking about social stories before. If you were to say, I'm looking for social stories. Okay, here's information about social stories from Van Ness, but there's also a school called Sha Tin Junior School in Hong Kong that created a whole bunch of amazing social stories, including a video of this is what lunch will look like, a video of this is what playtime will look like, where teachers actually got out and acted out, this is what it's going to look like to do playtime at our school. And so what we're trying to do here is capture both the forest and the trees of big picture, how do you run a remote learning environment, but also the very practical, tactile, what it looks like in practice. Another way that you could access this information is you could say, all right, I am just looking for folks who run elementary schools, pre-K through 2. I want to see comprehensive design of school system, soup to nuts, how are they doing it? And you see there are 8 different books that come up in the library here, including Van Ness Elementary School. But because we spent so much time with them, I'm going to look at one other example, which is Shatin, just because it came up before. All of these comprehensive school system designs are in a consistent and standardized template. No matter which one you click on, it's going to be in the same format. And we did that intentionally because we wanted to make it easy to access. I know sometimes when I'm looking at work that other folks are doing, it's all in different formats. It's the 70-page PDF. I'm not quite sure where to look. And so we thought that by creating a consistent template, it would make it easier to find particular pieces of information that you could adapt to your own context or serve as a point of inspiration for your own work. So for every single comprehensive school system design, there'll first be an overview of the mission and purpose of that school, their vision. We'll then say which of the 21st century leaps towards equitable learning do we feel like they live into. So Shatin, for example, lives into having a whole child focus, emphasizing connection and community, and anytime, anywhere learning. There's then a table of contents, information about their local context as an international school in Hong Kong. And what's really useful about that is they actually came back and started doing live hybrid instruction 3 months ago. So it's very useful to be able to see from people who are a little bit ahead of where we are in the US. Here are the graduate aims that they are aiming for their students by the time that they leave. Here are the design principles that they used when building their remote learning environment. Here are a set of student experiences that make up what it means for a learner in this environment. So they have a set of experiences related to preparing students for reopening, in-person learning and at-home learning, arrival and dismissal. And then finally, here's the nuts and bolts actual stuff of the way that they ran this. I think sometimes when I look at resources, I'll say, oh, this is high level and it's great, it gives me a big picture vision, but can I just have the actual schedule? Like, can I have the PD deck so I can see how to run this in my own environment? And that's what we tried to do here. So an example of the tactical, practical stuff, under family and community partnerships, we describe the way they communicate with families, but have a link to, okay, here is the letter that they actually sent home to families with expectations around personal hygiene and wearing of face masks. Here is a diary that they created for students to be taking their temperature every day before they come into school. And so we have this information for Van Ness Elementary, and all of the information that was shared earlier by Cynthia and the rest of the team, you can access through here, as well as other environments. So if you're looking for a high school or a middle school, or if you're looking for, I want something that's just hybrid or just remote, you could access that through here too. I'll loop back to where we started and touch on these other 2 sets of supports, the playbook and the Transcend Design community. The purpose of the playbook is to create a set of detailed guides and thinking jobs for figuring out, okay, I've got all of these great examples that other people have done, but how do I stitch them together in my own environment? How do I design something that works for me, for my community? Because my community shares some similarities with Van Ness, but it's also different from Van Ness in some ways. This playbook is divided into 2 big sections. The first section is laying the foundation for your recovery to reinvention planning work. Things like building your recovery team, setting your vision for the year, figuring out your constraints. And then 8 key components that you actually need to plan for. What are your policies and procedures? How are you describing your student and staff experience? How are you creating your schedule and facilities plan? If you were to look at just laying the foundation, what we've done is we've created a process to walk through in planning for how your school is going to move from responding to recovery to reinvention. And that includes both a set of things to think about, like as you build your recovery team, make sure that they include folks with these particular areas of expertise. Make sure you have someone who knows about technology. Make sure you have someone who knows about mental health, as well as a set of important perspectives to make sure that you're bringing in. And then we have linked within here different resources that can help you in the work. So TNTP, for example, put out a while ago a set of surveys for students, staff, and families to gauge their needs. So we embedded within here and we say, hey, you should be reaching out to families to see what their constraints and needs are for when they come back to school in the fall. We linked, here's the TNTP survey that you could be using. So this is both sort of guidance, but also, hey, here's the stuff that I can use to help me implement that guidance. After laying the foundation, then we walk through building out each of these 8 key components of your recovery reinvention plan. And so for updated policies and procedures, for example, what we've done is we've laid out, here is the CDC guidance around safety policies and procedures you need for your school, but then here's all this particular things that you need to make sure that you think through. You need to think through how you're doing health screening at arrival. You need to think through bathrooms, water fountains, recess, sort of a checklist to make sure that you're not neglecting the unknown unknowns that you have to plan for. And you see the synergy between this playbook and this library. Because as you are planning out, okay, what do I want this key student and staff experiences to be in the upcoming year? Well, you can pop open the library and you can search for experiences and you can say, oh, you know what? Strong Start should absolutely be one of the experiences that I'm doing in my school when we come back. And this is so great. Here's all these resources from Van Ness that maybe I need to adapt a little bit for my own context, but they're 80% of what I need for setting up really strong socially distant morning community connection in my school. And then the finally resource that I will share here is this Transcend Design Community. Transcend Design Community is a group of educators, researchers, technologists, thinkers, folks who are really committed to reinventing school to better meet the needs of students in an equitable way, in a way that prepares them for the 21st century. You can sign up here, and there's an amazing array of community connections and collaboration opportunities, points where you can ask for help. So we really encourage you to come check that out. And with that, I will pass it back to my colleague, Sarah. We'll do a little bit of Q&A.
Great. Thank you so much, David. We know there's a lot of resources in that library and playbook, so hopefully you have saved the links and you can bookmark them and come back to them at any time. And also engage with us in the Transcend Design community. It's meant to be a space for collaboration, asking questions, getting feedback, sharing resources. We have a whole platform on Slack and channels on Slack for the Transcend Design community. And then we also have webinars and other collaborations online and online events as part of that. Totally free, and we would love you all, if you haven't already been a member, to join. And I'll put the link in the chat. Let's move over to some questions. So I believe most of the questions are back for the Van Ness team. So Cynthia, in a moment, I think I'll invite you and then maybe Jenny as appropriate to answer some of these. But one from Ben Owens, it talks about how Van Ness has obviously established a culture rooted in these anchors. Well done. Can you describe how teachers routinely collaborate to help maintain and grow that culture and then respond to new issues, I imagine being remote? And there was also a question earlier that we touched on a little bit about helping teachers plan. So Cynthia, if I can call you back to the stage to kind of address that question, that'd be great.
Sure, and it's a great question. How do you do ongoing PD so that every year people stay grounded in the principles of the design anchors? At Van Ness, we have 4 primary structures for collaboration and professional learning. We will typically read a book over the summer together, and then we'll also have a book study that's during the school year that is the through line that drives that year of professional learning. And at our monthly staff meetings and at quarterly day-long PD days, we'll usually discuss issues around that book. Oftentimes it's a book that's related to socio-emotional learning. So we've read Grit, we've read Mindset, we've read Helping Children Succeed, we've read Lost at School by Ross Greene. A year ago, we read Anti-Bias Education as we were examining our practices in terms of race and equity. And we're returning to that this year by reading Zaretta Hammond's Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Brain. And so just through those book studies, teachers are often discussing the topic for the year and developing content knowledge around it. In addition to that, DCPS has LEAP, which is Learning Together to Improve Our Practice. And so in content area groups, teachers will get together for 90 minutes a week, and that's another place where they'll collaborate, and that's separate from, in addition, a weekly data meeting that teachers engage in. But separate from those school-based professional learning opportunities, I send teachers all over the world to build out their understanding of the concepts we focus on. So for example, when we rolled out makerspaces, Jenny and 3 other teachers went to Philadelphia, New Orleans, San Diego, Reggio Emilia, Italy, learning about making so that they could come back and turnkey and teach the rest of the staff. We send teachers to Project Zero at Harvard, and so lots of trainings that build out their understanding of student socio-emotional development. And then for our new teachers, our school psychologist engages in a summer that straddles into the fall, sort of intensive for all of they missed around our our social emotional learning programming. We have a website that supports that. And so every week our psychologists will take the new teachers through sort of a website study similar to a book study, so that by the time they're working with kids, they've gained some of the knowledge that they missed since they weren't, part of the founding staff. We're still tweaking all those and building out other ways we can help our staff to stay current, but those are the primary ways.
Great, thanks, Cynthia. And while your camera's still on, another question for you. Let's see, here we go. It was about impact and measuring. So are there any thoughts around measuring the impact of Strong Start or other tools that have been described? Are there any metrics that you're pointing or noticing to demonstrate the outcome of these experiences for students?
Yeah, so for Strong Start specifically, that beginning of the day, 20 to 30-minute set of activities, Transcend helped us to design some tests to see what the effectiveness of those were. And they involved, like, for several days at the beginning of the year, we observed in classrooms with a checklist, and observers noted the fidelity and the quality of the implementation of Strong Start, and then post Strong Start, the extent to which students were actively engaged in the lesson. And that helped us to know that it was worth codifying and sharing, because in classrooms that did all the components and where it was done well, kids were nearly 100% engaged. And that engagement sustained beyond just a couple minutes after Strong Start. In terms of the well-being model in general, we're using a variety of metrics. So our students and staff take the Panorama survey, for example. They take the Tripod student survey. We have some in-house surveys, so like the one that goes with that time, love, connection routine we might take at the beginning of the year, at the end of the year. Teaching Strategies Gold has a comprehensive early childhood development assessment system. It's for birth to age 8, and most places use it just for pre-K classes. We've taken that and we've used it a little bit off-label, but we are taking video and anecdotal evidence against the socio-emotional learning and cognitive thinking domains. So that was to gauge whether or not our maker spaces, for example, are truly building tenacity and ability to sustain through adversity, perseverance in our students who engage in learning in that part of the room. Kate from Transcend may be able to add to that, but we are held accountable to our academic measures, and we think that all of these things that focus on socio-emotional and physical development inevitably positively impacts our academic metrics, but we also are much more open to non-academic, more emotional or non-cognitive metrics as well.
Great, thanks, Cynthia. 2 questions about funding and PD for teachers for you. Where does the funding come from, or do you have a budget or grants? I guess people want to know how did you make this possible? How do you make this happen?
We have a combination of local funding, so just my DCPS school budget, and outside grants that we write, and many of them we write in tandem or in partnership with Transcend. So, for example, in terms of human capital, we've got 2 behavior techs, a social worker, and a psychologist. Those 4 staff members are critical to the implementation of lots of these structures, and they are funded because when I'm deciding on what staff members I'm going to buy during the budgeting process with DCPS, I prioritize them, knowing I need them to be able to be student facing at my school. And then some things we will get grant funding to support. So for example, we have an outside behavior consultant who helps us with data analysis and helps us with really nuanced behavior response for some of our trickiest students. Funding for that consultation, that person, is something that we might look to a grantor like New Schools Venture Fund to support us with private dollars. So a combination, and I would say doing that fundraising is something that we are constantly doing, because there is a good amount of this work that isn't able to be funded through just the DC local budget.
And then the last question here is just around like seeing these practices that we discussed today and that you shared being reflected in a DC school star rating or qualitative portion of a report card. Do you have any thoughts on that at all in terms of assessing or reporting out these practices?
Yeah, I'm sure it hasn't yet been embraced because it's such a hard thing to do. But I would love to see some of these aspects of a school community being included in a report card. And I think as a parent, it's the kind of information parents really want to see as well. Parents care about the test scores. They care about, some of the other metrics that are included on that report card, but they really care about like whether or not it's a warm, nurturing environment, whether or not when their child has a hard time, they'll be responded to with, a loving student-centered response versus an overly harsh response. So yes, and that's something, I would love to work on if the person that asked that question is considering figuring out a way to add that to that policy.
Great. Thanks so much, Cynthia. And then Emily has another question for you, just to follow up. Are there one or two practices you think would work better than another on the report card? So maybe we can connect you to as well. I don't know if you have quick thoughts, but we can connect you after the webinar as well.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think, some of these practices would be hard to sort of capture and give a score for, right? So like, I could envision, you might want to describe them more generally for students, for schools that aren't doing specifically Strong Start. And you might say like, is there a meaningful and welcoming way that students enter the building at this school? 1 to 4, and figure out an objective rubric around that would be a way that you might gauge something like Strong Start. I have to think on what other components of the student wellbeing work that we do could be able to be put on a report card in a way that's fair. And I would be happy to connect with Emily offline to talk more about that.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Cynthia. And that's a great segue into just the value of joining the Transcend design community, where Transcend as an organization is really trying to bring together school communities and people from all different types of lenses, fields, parents, educators, school leaders, superintendents, teachers, students, all together to have these sorts of conversations in that space. So I will throw the link in the chat box for that one more time if you want to join and you haven't yet. And then thank you so much for your questions and your comments in the chat box and your participation. Thanks so much to all of our presenters today from Van Ness. It was really delightful to see a student speak about her experience, and then to my teammates at Transcend. So I think there's one last slide here for the next event in this webinar series. So it's actually July 23rd, which is tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern, so same time as this one. And it's called Building Capacity in Crisis Using Design Thinking to Lead. So as you exit the webinar today, just take a moment. I believe Digital Promise will put a survey into the chat box, and you can fill out the survey with any feedback that you have on these webinars in this series. And otherwise, thank you so much for your time and for your attendance today. And we're really happy to share these resources. And so feel free to reach out to us via the Transcend Design community. And Cynthia has put her email address in the chat box as well. We're really, survey will show up as you exit. Really grateful for your time. Thanks so much. And with that, we're done.